The ancestry kit sat on the marble kitchen island like a harmless birthday gift, wrapped in the promise of discovering distant heritage. Yet Elena's smile, as she presented it, didn't quite reach her eyes. She claimed she wanted total transparency to finally silence his mother's whispers about their son's paternity, insisting that science would prove her loyalty once and for all. But as Julian reached for the box, he missed the way her fingers tightened around her wine glass, a subtle, white-knuckled brace for an impact she thought she could control. If you find yourself drawn to the fragile moments before a perfect life shatters into irreparable pieces, stay with me as we peel back the layers. The wind off Lake Michigan battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a low, rhythmic thrum that usually lulled Julian to sleep. Tonight, however, the sound felt like a warning. Julian Vance stood by the kitchen island, the cold marble seeping through the sleeves of his dress shirt. In front of him, sitting innocently between a bowl of organic lemons and a stack of unread architectural digests, was a small, shrink-wrapped box. Ancestry DNA. Discover your story. It's the only way, Julian, Elena said. Her voice was soft, but it carried that steel edge she reserved for contract negotiations at her gallery. She was standing by the wine fridge, pouring a glass of Sancerre. The pour was steady, but Julian noticed she gripped the neck of the bottle a fraction too tightly. Elena, we don't need to do this, Julian said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. My mother she's old. She's bitter. You know how she gets after a few martinis. Nobody actually listens to her. I listen, Elena countered, turning to face him. The track lighting caught the hollow of her throat, the elegance of her collarbone. She was perfect, too perfect to be questioned. She looked at Leo tonight, right in the eyes, and said he has fortunate eyes, because they certainly aren't Vance's. She's been doing this for 5 years, Julian. 5 years of insinuating that I'm a liar. Julian sighed, looking down at the box. He hated the doubt that his mother planted, like a weed in a manicured garden. But he hated even more that a part of him, a small, dark, shameful part, had let it grow. Leo was fair. Julian was dark. Leo had a cleft chin. Julian didn't. Genetics were a lottery, he knew that, but the whispers were exhausting. So this is what? A rebuke? Julian asked. It's transparency, Elena said, sliding the glass of wine across the counter toward him. It's proof. We take the tests. We get the results. We print them out on heavy cardstock, and next Sunday, we hand it to her with the roast chicken. I want to clear everything up. I want her to see in black and white that she's wrong. She walked around the island and placed a hand on his chest. Her palm was warm, her perfume, sandalwood and rose, familiar and grounding. I'm doing this for us. So, we can stop pretending her comments don't hurt. Unless... She pulled back slightly, her eyes narrowing. Unless you think she's right? The question hung in the air, suspended in the silence of the expensive apartment. This was the trap. If he said no, he had to take the test. If he hesitated, he was accusing her. Of course I don't think she's right, Julian said quickly. Too quickly. Good, Elena smiled. It was a dazzling smile, the one that had charmed donors into writing million-dollar checks for abstract sculptures. But for a split second, Julian thought he saw a flicker behind it. Fear? Bravado? She picked up the box and tore the plastic wrap with a sharp zip. Then let's do it now, before dinner. She opened the kit, laying out the plastic tubes and the stabilizing fluid. It looked clinical, stripping the romance out of their biology. She handed a tube to him. Spit, she commanded playfully. though her eyes remained intensely serious. Julian held the plastic tube. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. A man who had everything, about to perform a science experiment to prove he was allowed to keep it. He looked at Elena, who was already filling her own tube, her focus absolute. She seemed so sure, so incredibly confident. He shouldn't have doubted her. Her willingness to do this proved her innocence, didn't it? A guilty woman wouldn't demand a DNA test. A guilty woman would bury the past, not invite a microscope to examine it. Julian brought the tube to his lips. He didn't know it then, but he was about to sign the death warrant of his marriage. To transparency, he murmured, and began to fill the vial. Elena watched him, her chest rising and falling in a deep, silent breath. To the truth, she whispered. But as she capped her vial, her hand shook. Just once. A tiny tremor that rattled the plastic against the marble counter. Julian blinked, wondering if he had imagined it. The morning light over Chicago was gray and unforgiving, filtering through the high-rise windows to illuminate the kitchen island with a sterile clarity. The two plastic vials sat inside their biohazard bags, resting on the granite like evidence seized from a crime scene rather than a voluntary submission. Julian stood by the coffee maker, listening to the machine hiss and sputter. He watched Elena moving around the kitchen. She was dressed for the gallery, a sharp charcoal blazer and tailored trousers, but her movements were frantic. She was wiping down the counter, a repetitive, circular motion that had long since cleaned away any imaginary crumbs. "Stop," Julian said softly. Elena froze, the dish towel bunched in her hand. She turned, her expression rearranging itself instantly into a mask of breezy efficiency. "I just hate a mess, Julian. You know that." "I meant the tests," he said, nodding toward the sealed bags. "We can still throw them out. We can just tell my mother we did it and the results were boring. European mutts, 100% boring." Elena's eyes hardened, the softness vanishing. She walked over to the island and picked up the prepaid shipping envelope. And let her win? Let her keep making those little comments about Leo's nose or his hairline every Thanksgiving? No. She shoved her sample into the envelope with a decisive thrust. Then she picked up Julian's. For a second, she held it, staring at the clear liquid inside. Julian couldn't read the expression on her face. It wasn't triumph. It looked, for a fleeting second, like regret. But then she blinked, dropped it into the package, and ripped the adhesive strip off the flap. The sound of the plastic sealing shut was loud in the quiet room. Zip. Finality. "What are you guys doing?" Julian flinched. Leo was standing in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled. The boy walked over, climbing onto one of the bar stools with the clumsy grace of a 5-year-old. "Just mailing some boring paperwork, sweetie," Elena said, her voice pitching up an octave into that bright, maternal tone she wore so well. She smoothed Leo's hair that was a shade lighter than Julian's, a fact his mother never failed to point out. Julian looked at his son. He searched the boy's face, as he had done 1,000 times before, looking for a mirror. He saw Elena's mouth. He saw... whose eyes? They were blue, like Julian's, but the shape was different, sharper. "Stop it," Julian told himself. "You're paranoid." "Can I help?" Leo asked, reaching for the envelope. "No!" Elena snapped. The room went still. Leo recoiled, hurt flashing across his small face. Elena recovered instantly. She forced a laugh, though it sounded brittle. "I mean, no, sweetie, it's dirty. Daddy and I have to go drop it off on our way out. Why don't you go ask Nanny to get your cereal?" As Leo slid off the stool and scampered away, The air in the kitchen felt heavy, charged with the static of things unsaid. Julian picked up his coffee, the ceramic hot against his palm. "You're on edge," he observed quietly. "I'm not on edge," Elena replied, grabbing her purse and the package. She didn't look at him. "I'm just ready to be done with this. I'm ready for the truth to shut everyone up." They took the elevator down in silence. The descent felt long. When they reached the lobby, they walked to the drop box outside. The wind was biting, whipping Elena's hair across her face. She pulled the metal handle of the drop box open. It groaned, a rusty, hungry sound. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Her hand hovered over the dark slot, the envelope trembling slightly in the wind. "Elena?" Julian said. She dropped it. The package tumbled into the darkness with a soft thud. "Done," she said, dusting her hands off as if she had just disposed of something toxic. She turned to him, and the wind caught her eyes, making them water. "Now we just wait." Julian nodded, pulling his coat tighter. He felt a strange hollowness in his chest, a premonition that the man who walked back into that building would not be the same man who came out when the results returned. They had asked the question. Now, they were at the mercy of the answer. The progress bar on the computer screen had been stuck at extracting DNA for 3 days. Julian had the tab open in the background of his CAD software, a tiny silent sentinel watching him work. Every hour he refreshed the page, and every hour nothing changed. The lab in Utah was taking its time, indifferent to the fact that it was holding a man's entire reality in a petri dish. It had been 2 weeks since they dropped the samples in the box, 2 weeks of aggressive normalcy at home. Elena was cooking more. Roasts, risottos, complex dishes that required focus. They watched movies. They played board games with Leo, but they did not talk about the test. It was as if the envelope had never existed, as if they hadn't wagered their marriage on a cheek swab. Julian sat in his corner office, the gray Chicago skyline looming outside. He was supposed to be reviewing the blueprints for a new library wing, but his eyes kept drifting to the digital calendar on his second monitor. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't look. His hand moved the mouse anyway. He clicked back. Not by days or months, but by years. 2019, 2018. He scrolled to November, the month of conception. The calendar was a grid of innocent blue blocks. Client meeting, site inspection, dinner with the Millers, and then the large block that spanned 3 weeks. New York project, on-site. Julian stared at the dates. He remembered that trip. It had been a career-defining opportunity, a massive renovation in Tribeca that demanded his absolute presence. He remembered the freezing rain in Manhattan, the lonely hotel room service, and the guilt of leaving Elena behind just as the Chicago winter was setting in. He remembered the phone calls. "The heat is out again, Julian. It's freezing in here. I'll call the Super L. I'm sorry." "Don't worry. Marcus came over. He's taking a look at the boiler. He brought wine." Julian closed his eyes, the memory sharp and jagged. Marcus. His older brother had always been the fixer, the one who showed up with a toolkit and a bottle of expensive Cabernet when Julian was unavailable. At the time, Julian had felt only gratitude. Marcus was family. Marcus was looking out for her. But now, staring at the calendar, the gratitude curdled into something nauseating. "Earth to Julian!" The voice boomed from the doorway, shattering the silence. Julian snapped his eyes open and minimized the calendar instantly. Marcus was standing there, leaning against the doorframe in a cashmere coat that cost more than Julian's first car. He was smiling, that easy, wolfish smile that made everyone in a room want to please him. "You look like you're trying to decode the Matrix," Marcus said, stepping into the office without waiting for an invitation. He smelled of cold air and expensive tobacco. "Mom said you guys missed Sunday dinner. Everything okay?" Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. Seeing Marcus now, with the timeline fresh in his mind, was physically painful. He looked at his brother's face, the strong jaw, the confident set of the shoulders. Then, unbidden, an image of Leo flashed in his mind. The same jawline, the same confidence. "We're fine," Julian lied, his voice tight. "Elena just wanted a quiet weekend, a reset." Marcus nodded, walking over to the window to look out at the city. He dominated the space, shrinking the room. "A reset is good. Elena seemed tense last time I saw her. You need to take care of her, Jules. She carries a lot." The words were patronizing, delivered with the casual arrogance of a big brother who thinks he knows better. "You need to take care of her." "I take care of my wife," Julian said, sharper than he intended. Marcus turned, eyebrows raised. "Easy, Tiger. I'm on your side. Just checking in." He checked his watch. "I'm grabbing a steak at Gibson's with a client. Come with. You look like you need a drink." "I can't," Julian said, glancing at the minimized tab where the DNA status waited. "I have work." "Always the worker bee," Marcus chuckled. He patted Julian on the shoulder as he walked out, a heavy, possessive pat. "Don't work too hard, little brother. Some things you can't build your way out of." When Marcus left, the office felt strangely empty, yet suffocating. Julian stared at the door. He brought wine. He turned back to his screen and maximized the browser. He hit refresh. Status: analysis complete. Report generating. Julian's breath hitched. The wait was over. The notification arrived at 2:14 a.m. Julian was not asleep. He was sitting in the leather wingback chair in his study, nursing a glass of bourbon that had long since gone warm. The apartment was entombed in silence, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic breathing of the city outside. When his phone lit up on the side table, the sudden brightness was violent in the dark room. Ancestry DNA. "Your results are ready? Log in to view?" He stared at the message. His heart performed a slow, painful thud against his ribs. For a moment, he considered deleting the email. He could go into the bedroom, crawl under the duvet next to Elena, and live the rest of his life in the safe, warm ignorance of the last 5 years. He could burn the password, but his hand moved before his mind could stop it. He picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over the link, trembling slightly, before tapping the screen. Face ID unlocked the app. The cheerful, colorful interface loaded, greens and yellows representing regions of the world, smiling stock photos of diverse families. It was grotesquely upbeat. He navigated to the Matches tab. Julian Vance, self, Leo Vance, managed profile. He tapped on Leo's name. He expected to see the label parent-child. He had researched this. He knew the numbers. A parent and child share 50% of their DNA, roughly 3,400 centimorgans. It was a biological certainty, a mathematical lock. The page refreshed. Relationship, close family shared. DNA, 1756 cm, 25%. Predicted relationship, uncle, grandparent, or half-sibling. Julian frowned, squinting at the screen. The light stung his tired eyes. Uncle. That had to be a mistake. A glitch in the algorithm. He was Leo's father. He had signed the birth certificate. He had cut the cord. He clicked on the detailed analysis. The chart showed the segments of shared DNA. They were there, thick blocks of color indicating connection. He was related to the boy. The science didn't deny that, but it denied the depth. It denied the half that was missing. If he only shared 25%, he wasn't the father. The glass of bourbon slipped from his fingers. It didn't shatter. It landed with a dull thud on the thick Persian rug, the amber liquid soaking into the wool like a spreading stain. Julian didn't notice. His mind was racing, tearing through the implications with terrifying speed. If he was the uncle, then Leo's father had to be a close male relative of Julian. A father, a brother. His father was dead. That left one person. The memory of the calendar crashed into him, the freezing rain in New York, the empty hotel bed, the broken boiler in Chicago. Marcus came over. He brought wine. The air in the room suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Julian stood up, knocking the chair back. He gasped, a dry, ragged sound that scraped his throat. The nausea hit him in a wave, hot and acidic. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a random affair at a gallery opening. It was Marcus. Elena hadn't just cheated. She had kept it in the blood. She had demanded this test, demanded transparency, banking on the fact that the genetic similarity between two brothers would be enough to muddy the waters. She had gambled on the 99.9% similarity of the human genome, hoping the consumer-grade test wouldn't parse the difference between a father and an uncle. But the math didn't lie. 25% was not 50%. Julian looked down at his hands. They looked the same as they had 5 minutes ago, but they felt alien. These were not the hands of a father. They were the hands of a fool. He looked toward the hallway, toward the master bedroom where Elena was sleeping soundly, wrapped in Egyptian cotton, dreaming of her vindication. He picked up the iPad from the desk. The screen was bigger, brighter. He needed to show her. He needed to see her face when the transparency she demanded finally arrived. Julian walked out of the study. His footsteps were heavy, echoing like judgment in the quiet corridor. The master bedroom smelled of lavender and sleep, a sharp contrast to the whiskey and bile rising in Julian's throat. He stood at the foot of the bed, the iPad glowing in his hand like a blue ember. Elena was curled on her side, her dark hair fanned out across the white pillowcase, one hand tucked under her cheek. She looked innocent. She looked like the woman he had loved for 7 years. "Elena," he said. His voice was a rasp, barely louder than the hum of the air purifier. She didn't stir. "Elena," he said again, sharper this time. She shifted, groaning softly, and blinked her eyes open. She squinted against the darkness, trying to focus on the silhouette looming over her. "Julian, what time is it?" "It's time to be transparent," he said. He walked to the side of the bed and thrust the iPad toward her face. The screen was bright, harsh. Elena recoiled, shielding her eyes with a manicured hand. "Turn that off," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Are you drunk? What is wrong with you?" "Read it." Elena sat up, pulling the duvet explicitly around her chest, annoyed now. She took the tablet, her eyes adjusting to the glare. Julian watched her face. He needed to see the exact moment the comprehension hit. He needed to see the mask slip. She scanned the page. "Ancestry DNA. Okay, the results are in. Great. We can print them out in the morning." She started to hand the tablet back, feigning disinterest. "Go to sleep, Julian. Look at the numbers, Elena. Look at the relationship match." She paused. Her eyes flicked back to the screen. She frowned. 25%. So? That's a lot. It proves he's yours. It's just, genetics are weird. You know that. My sister only shares 40% with me. 25% is a grandparent. Julian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Or a half-sibling, or an uncle. Elena went still. The duvet slipped slightly from her shoulder. Don't be ridiculous. Those tests are garbage. They make mistakes all the time. It's a consumer kit, Julian, not a medical lab. I looked at the raw data, Elena. I looked at the centimorgans. It's not a glitch. He leaned down, placing his hands on the mattress, caging her in. Tell me I'm wrong. Look me in the eye and tell me that when I was in New York freezing my ass off for our future, you weren't here with him. With who? She snapped, but her eyes darted to the left. A microtel. Don't insult me, Julian whispered. He brought wine. He fixed the boiler. He fixed everything, didn't he? Elena threw the iPad onto the bed. It landed face up, the graph of their broken family illuminating the ceiling. You are obsessed. You are so insecure, so jealous of Marcus that you're inventing scenarios to ruin us. This is about your mother, isn't it? She's finally gotten into your head. This isn't about my mother! Julian's voice cracked, rising in volume. He caught himself, glancing at the door, thinking of Leo sleeping down the hall. Leo, who shared his nose but his brother's blood. This is about the math, Elena. The math says I am his uncle. Elena opened her mouth to argue, to scream, to throw him out. But then she stopped. She looked at Julian, really looked at him, and saw the hollowness in his eyes. She saw that the adoration that had sustained her for years was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical repulsion. The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. It was one night, she whispered. The admission hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Julian felt his knees weaken. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his back to her. He couldn't look at her. One night. You were gone, she said, the tears starting now, useless, defensive tears. I was lonely. I was scared about the pregnancy. We had been trying for so long and nothing was happening. Marcus came over. He listened. He made me feel seen, Julian. You were always so busy building buildings, and I was just there. So you slept with my brother. It didn't mean anything, she pleaded, reaching for his back. Julian flinched as if burned. He stood up, walking to the window. The city lights blurred before him. It meant Leo, he said. It meant my son isn't my son. He is your son, Elena hissed, desperate now. You raised him. You fed him. You taught him to ride a bike. Biology is just chemistry. Love is what matters. Julian turned to face her. His face was a mask of tragedy. That's a lovely speech, Elena. Save it for the divorce lawyers. Because right now, all I see is my brother laughing at me every time I look at that boy. The elevator to the 42nd floor of the Rookery building moved with a speed that made Julian's ears pop, a physical sensation that mirrored the pressure building inside his skull. He hadn't slept. He hadn't showered. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with red exhaustion. The receptionist at Vance Capital tried to smile, a practiced, glossy expression, but faltered when she saw Julian's face. Mr. Vance is in a conference call with Tokyo, she began, reaching for her headset. He'll take this meeting, Julian said. He didn't stop. He walked past the heavy glass doors, down the corridor lined with modern art that cost more than Julian made in a year. He pushed open the door to the corner office. Marcus was there, standing behind a desk that looked like the deck of an aircraft carrier. He was speaking into a headset, his gaze fixed on a wall of monitors displaying market trends. He looked fresh, rested, immaculate in a navy pinstripe suit. The contrast was a physical blow. Marcus held up a finger, signaling 1 minute, his face annoyed but unconcerned. Julian didn't wait. He walked up to the desk and slammed his hand down on the polished mahogany. It wasn't a violent strike, but the sound was sharp enough to cut through the room. Marcus sighed, tapped his headset, and pulled it off. "I have to call you back," he muttered to the air, then looked at Julian. "Jesus, Jules, you look like hell. Is this about the dinner thing? Because I can smooth it over with Mom if—" "I know," Julian said. The words came out cold, stripped of any inflection. Marcus paused. He leaned back in his leather chair, the leather creaking softly. He didn't ask what Julian knew. He didn't feign ignorance. The intelligence in his eyes shifted, sharpening. The brotherly mask dissolved, replaced by the face of the hedge fund manager assessing a risk. "Elena told you," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "The DNA told me," Julian corrected. "She tried to pass it off. She thought we were close enough genetically that the test wouldn't pick it up. She wanted transparency. Can you believe that? She wanted to prove to my mother that she was faithful, using your son." Marcus remained still. He didn't flinch. He didn't look ashamed. He picked up a silver pen and turned it over in his fingers. "It was a long time ago, Julian. It was a complicated night. She was vulnerable. I was there. It happens." "It happens?" Julian laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "You slept with my wife while I was working to pay for the apartment you visited, and then you let me raise him. For 5 years, Marcus. You came to his birthday parties. You bought him that damn bicycle. You patted me on the back and played the cool uncle." "I am the cool uncle," Marcus said, his voice dropping, devoid of warmth. "Look, what did you want me to do? Blow up your life? You were happy. You had the perfect little family. I gave that to you. You couldn't have done it on your own. Literally, it seems." The insult landed with precision. "You couldn't have done it on your own." "Did you know?" Julian asked, his voice trembling with the effort to not leap across the desk. "Did you know he was yours?" "I suspected," Marcus admitted with a shrug. "The timing was tight. And let's be honest, the kid has my chin. But does it matter? You're the one who wiped his nose and read him Goodnight Moon. You're the father in every way that counts for the Hallmark cards. Why ruin it now with biology?" Julian looked at his brother, really looked at him. He saw the arrogance that had always been there, the belief that Marcus was entitled to everything, the best toys, the best schools, and apparently, Julian's wife. Marcus didn't see this as a betrayal. He saw it as a transaction. He had provided the genetic material Julian lacked, and he had graciously allowed Julian to take the credit. "You stole my life," Julian whispered. "I enriched it," Marcus countered, standing up. He buttoned his jacket, signaling the meeting was over. "Go home, Julian. Take a shower. Forgive your wife. Because if you blow this up, you lose the boy. And I'm certainly not going to raise him. I'm a bachelor, remember? That's my brand." He walked past Julian toward the door. "Be smart. Be an architect. Fix the crack in the foundation and move on. Nobody else needs to know." Julian stood alone in the office, surrounded by the hum of millions of dollars moving invisibly through the air. He realized then that Marcus was right about one thing. Julian had a choice. But it wasn't about fixing the foundation. It was about realizing the house had been built on a sinkhole from the very beginning. The living room floor was a minefield of colorful plastic bricks. Leo was building a skyscraper, his small tongue protruding from the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. a habit Julian used to think was adorable, a mirror of his own expression when drafting blueprints. Now, watching from the sofa, Julian wondered if Marcus did that too. He wondered if this specific mannerism was a learned behavior from the man who raised him, or a genetic code written by the man who sired him. "Daddy, I need the long red one," Leo commanded, not looking up. The word daddy hit Julian like a physical blow. It felt stolen. It felt like a title he had been wearing by mistake, a costume that didn't fit anymore. For 5 years, he had been the architect of this boy's life, laying the foundation, framing the walls, ensuring the structure was sound, but the ground underneath belonged to someone else. "Daddy?" Leo turned, his brow furrowing. Julian blinked, forcing himself back to the room. "Sorry, Leo, I don't see the red one." "It's right there," Leo pointed, exasperated. The flash of impatience was sudden and sharp. Julian froze. He saw it then, the tilt of the head, the slight flare of the nostrils. It was Marcus. It wasn't a vague resemblance anymore. It was a haunting. The ghost of his brother was sitting on his living room rug, wearing dinosaur pajamas. Julian handed the brick to the boy, his fingers brushing Leo's warm hand. He expected a spark of connection, the familiar rush of protectiveness. Instead, he felt a wave of nausea. He pulled his hand back too quickly. "Thanks," Leo muttered, jamming the brick into place with aggressive force. "Uncle Marcus said he's going to take me to the aquarium soon. He said they have sharks." The air left the room. Julian gripped the armrest of the sofa. "When did he say that?" "When he called Mommy today," Leo said casually, oblivious to the grenade he had just tossed. Julian looked toward the kitchen. Elena was there, chopping vegetables for a salad. She had been humming, pretending that the silence in the house was peaceful rather than necrotic. She stopped chopping. Her back went rigid. She knew Julian had heard. Julian stood up and walked into the kitchen. The domesticity of the scene, the smell of roasting chicken, the steam rising from the pot, felt grotesque. It was a stage set for a play that had already been canceled. "He called you?" Julian asked, his voice low. Elena turned, the knife still in her hand. She looked tired, her eyes dark-rimmed. "He called to check on us, on the situation. He wants to help, Julian." "Help?" Julian laughed, a hollow sound. "He wants to take his son to the aquarium." "Lower your voice," Elena hissed, glancing fearfully at the living room. "Leo doesn't know. He's just a child, Julian. He's your child. Don't punish him for my mistake." "It's not just a mistake, Elena. It's a rewrite. Every memory I have, his first steps, his first word, the time he broke his arm, it's all contextualized now. I look at him and I don't see myself. I see the man who laughed in my face yesterday." "You're being selfish," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "You're the only father he knows. Are you really going to walk away because of DNA? Are you that small?" "Maybe," Julian said, looking past her, out the window where the city lights blurred in the rain. "Or maybe I'm just tired of living in a house that Marcus paid for, raising a son Marcus made, with a wife Marcus had first." "Daddy! It fell down!" Leo wailed from the other room. The crash of plastic bricks shattering against the hardwood floor echoed through the apartment. Julian flinched. Instinct told him to run to the boy, to comfort him, to say it's okay, we can build it again. That was what a father did. But his feet didn't move. He looked at the doorway, paralyzed. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he felt like an intruder. He was the uncle here. He was the guest who had overstayed his welcome in this biological family unit. "You should go help him," Julian said to Elena, his voice dead. "He needs his parent." He turned and walked toward the bedroom to pack a bag, leaving his wife and her son to pick up the pieces alone. The apartment in River North was everything the penthouse had not been: industrial, minimalist, and aggressively quiet. There were no stray Lego bricks embedded in the rug, no scent of Elena's sandalwood perfume lingering on the throw pillows. It smelled of fresh paint and unresolved choices. Julian stood by the kitchen counter, a slab of concrete that felt cold under his palms, and checked his watch. 10 a.m. His custody time began in 30 minutes. He picked up his keys, the metal biting into his skin. The lawyers had been efficient. Elena, terrified that Julian would expose the paternity scandal to the public, or worse, to Marcus's social circle, had conceded to every term. She kept the apartment. Julian kept his dignity, though he wasn't sure what that was worth on the open market anymore. He drove to the old building on autopilot, his body remembering the turns his mind tried to reject. The doorman nodded to him, a gesture filled with that pitying discretion reserved for the newly separated. When the elevator doors opened on the penthouse floor, the hallway felt narrower than he remembered. He knocked. He didn't use his key. That felt like an important distinction now. Elena opened the door. She looked thinner, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that highlighted the sharpness of her cheekbones. She wore a high-necked sweater, as if trying to armor herself against him. "He's ready," she said. Her voice was polite, brittle. "His backpack is by the door. I packed his inhaler." "Okay," Julian said. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the threshold, the line between his past and his present. "Julian," she started, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "Marcus came by yesterday." Julian stiffened. "I don't need to know that. He wants to set up a trust fund for Leo, for his education." "Leo has an education fund," Julian said, his voice level. "I set it up the day he was born." "I know. But Marcus, he feels he should contribute, since—" She couldn't say it. The transparency she had demanded was now a glare she couldn't look into. "Tell Marcus he can buy the kid's stocks if he wants," Julian said, looking past her. "But he doesn't get to buy the title, not yet." "Daddy!" The shout came from the hallway. Leo came barreling around the corner, wearing his winter coat and a backpack that looked too big for him. He slammed into Julian's legs, wrapping his arms around his knees. For a second, just a fraction of a second, Julian hesitated. He felt the familiar shape of the boy, the warmth, the unconditional trust. And then the overlay hit him. The genetic map, the 25%, the uncle probability. But then Leo looked up, his eyes bright and confused. "Are we going to the new house? Does it have a TV?" Julian looked down. He saw Marcus's chin. He saw Elena's mouth. But he also saw the scrape on Leo's forehead from when Julian had taught him to ride the bike. He saw the way Leo tied his shoes, the loop, swoop, and pull method Julian had spent hours demonstrating. Biology was ink on paper. It was immutable, yes. But it was also history. It didn't account for the nights spent rocking a feverish toddler or the pride of a first swimming lesson. Marcus had the blood, but he had none of the time. Julian placed a hand on Leo's head. It wasn't the same electric connection he used to feel. That naivety was gone, burned away by the truth. But something else was there. A heavy, solemn responsibility. "Yeah, buddy," Julian said, his voice rough. "It has a TV, and I bought a new set of bricks." He looked at Elena. She was watching them, tears silently tracking down her face. She had her answer. She had kept her secret for 5 years, and in demanding proof of her loyalty, she had lost her husband. She had gotten her transparency, and it had left her empty. "Have him back by 6, Julian said. He took Leo's hand, the hand of his nephew, the son of his heart, and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed, sealing them in together, leaving the shattered glass house behind. The descent was smooth. Julian didn't know where they were going next, or how he would explain this when Leo was older. But as they walked out into the cold Chicago wind, the air felt clean. Harsh, biting, but undeniably clear.